Lynching has finally become a crime in the United States. I know we've all been waiting, particularly
Oh, thank God.
our brothers, the African Americans of the United States, who have been living in fear up until this day.
I've been living in fear for them. I've thought to myself, murder, I mean, that's a no-go, but lynching...
That's completely legal, and at any point you could have been... Don't worry. As we can see here, we have a representative of the Biden administration, the penguins of Madagascar, saying...
What? Wait, what's this?
This is just a reference to me, but you have Mrs. Obama there being told, don't worry, Mrs. Obama, we've done it, we've stopped racism. And we can see that in real time with President Biden giving basically that speech. If we move forward, we have...
I mean, he shored up the African-American community. All of them who voted him confirmed black.
Yeah, so here you are. Here's the penguin himself saying, I've just signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law, making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in American history. Don't worry, Mrs. Obama, we've stopped racism. We've signed the Anti-Lynching Act. And if we move forward, we can see some of the...
They might as well have just signed in the Racism Bad Act.
Essentially. So we can see a spicy joke in response to this from Sir Dankula here saying, I didn't know lynching was legal. Can't believe I missed my chance. Of course, him being a comedian, of course, this is a joke. There's also this, you can see the point below. He's like, shame none of you can lynch me for this tweet now that it's a crime. He's got you there.
He beat the system.
If we go to the next one, a lot of people were whining about Dankula in here. I love this account, people whining about Dankula. It's just,
You've got to follow all of the Twitter accounts that are people whining about Stone Toss, people whining about Dank, Andy No.
Yeah, so a lot of people saying, oh man, he made a joke I don't like. Yeah, and he'll do it again.
Yeah, wait, no, they've not just done that, they've gone, man, he made a joke I don't like. Time to be racist. I hate white people.
Yeah, but if we move to the actual meat of this conversation, because there is the political conversation here, which is, what the hell are you talking about? Like, lynching surely has always been illegal. Like, killing someone is a crime. So what
Murder's bad. Okay.
So what is this? So I went to a left-wing source to get their side of the argument, Vox here, saying what an anti-lynching law means in 2022. Apparently murder is still illegal, so...
Well, they didn't repeal the murder law and replace it with the anti-lynching?
No, you're allowed to murder now, just not lynch. Yeah. So on Tuesday, President Joe Biden signed into law a bill that classifies lynching as a federal hate crime, punishable by up to 30 years in prison. So the change here is that it's all still illegal, but if you lynch someone on the basis of race, it's a hate crime, and therefore you'll have a harsher sentence. That's what's changed. That's the factor there. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, named after the 14-year-old boy who was kidnapped, brutally beaten, and shot by a mob of white men in Mississippi in 1955, 70-odd years ago, before they threw him into a river, allows an act to be prosecuted as a lynching when a person conspires to commit a hate crime that results in death, seriously bodily harm, or serious harms. The bill's passage is long overdue, and, I mean, you would have thought of it quite some time, surely, but then it's already been illegal, so, okay. But its arrival is still an important symbolic power, Fox right, and will give federal prosecutors another tool to prosecute some of the country's most brutal hate crimes. In other words, the act builds on the severity of federal hate crime laws that already exist.
I mean, they've highlighted how completely transparent this whole thing is by just pointing out its important symbolic power. This doesn't actually really do anything because murder already illegal.
Yes.
But it sends out a signal. It sends out a message to everybody that Biden cares about race issues.
Well, it does also change the law to some extent, because you do have the fact that this is now a law which is not concerned with the individual justice of the victim and the perpetrators who should be punished justly. No, it is instead concerned with the feelings of the community who are symbolically hurt by a hate crime, because it's about the whole community, not just the individual. This is the logic of why hate crimes exist.
But I thought murder bad because you're killing the individual.
No, murder bad because you're harming the community's feelings.
Ah.
And this isn't actually, I mean, you can see the argument that, you've brought a terror upon the community by engaging in a racist murder, and therefore, I don't know, all Asian people in the area, or all black people, or all white people feel a bit more scared. But that's not.
But if
really,
anybody, if anybody is murdered in any community,
the victim
outside,
is
even if they're not being lynched, surely that would make the community a bit more scared.
Sure,
in the first place.
But it also doesn't really make much sense, because like the person who's the biggest victim here is the victim. not the random people who share the skin tone in the community.
Why do we have to talk about things like this nowadays? I swear to God.
You would have thought. And that's the main meat of me for here in this argument, the political aspect of hate crimes as a subject. And also we can point to the reality, which is that we've tried this all in Britain, We've really taken these processes to their end logical point. And I can demonstrate to you what happened. There's also the obvious point that if we had this law back when Emmett Till was being tried, it wouldn't have changed anything. Because it was a white jury who let the perpetrators off because they were racist. So they weren't going to let them off for murder and then try them for lynching and find them. That wasn't going to happen. So, again, also.
Well, the murder was fine, but the lynching, that's where I draw the line.
Doesn't make any sense there either. But also, the fact that. So, the logic of hate crimes here is that it doesn't change the fact that the murder's taken place, obviously, but it makes the racist murder more serious. Of course, more serious than what? Well, also, it makes it more serious than sexist murders, or transphobic murders, or anti-goth murders.
Which is a genuine thing.
Or anti-furry murders. These things are not taken all seriously as a racist murder. And you might think, well, come on, that's a bit mad. Like, we have protected characteristics, or these special ones about, being a certain race, or being a certain sex, and therefore they preserve, or at least deserve, to have a higher status in the murder category. Maybe you think this. Right, run that logic to its conclusion, because we did in Britain, and we can demonstrate this. This is a document which Carl brought up from the Runnymede Trust, which is what set out the definition of racism in Britain under Tony Blair and became the substance by which British law is applied in this case. And, well, what did they have to say? Well, racism is a subtle and complex phenomenon. It may be based on colour and physical features, or on culture, nationality, and way of life.
Okay.
This is how we ran the hate crime legislation, because our definition of racism started to include culture, way of life.
And this is where you get nice, very easy openings for all of the systemic racism. Because, well, you're expecting me to integrate into your culture? That's systemic racism.
Well, no, this is what Lynch's open, that now, okay, all policing is political, because we're going to do it on political lines whenever a hate incident or crime is involved. You may remember Islamophobia, or anti-Muslim bigotry if you're not an insane person who wants to actually accurately represent these things. Because the next one, we can see Islamophobia here being debated, and the police chiefs saying that, no, this doesn't work, because, again, remember, racism can be based on a culture. You can be racist against a culture, or a way of life. So if Islam is, homophobic, and you're upset by that, you're an Islamophobe.
Or if potentially, say, just as a hypothetical, that, say, Islamic men target young white girls, for instance.
That's their way of life, their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you disagree with this, you are racist. This may sound mad to Americans, I know, but this is actually what happened in Britain, and we can demonstrate it. So here you have the police literally saying that when this first came through for the definition of Islamophobia, this was mad. And what do they have to say? Well, the definition of Islamophobia that was given to them, Islamophobia is rooted in racism, and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Rooted in what race? Exactly. Rooted in what racism? Type of racism against what race again?
And
Muslims aren't a race.
I was going to say, I've met white Muslims.
Yeah. Also perceived Muslimness.
So is insulting a white Muslim the same as insulting an Arab Muslim, or is that classified differently?
I think that's all the same, but that's all an Islamophobic hate crime, which has nothing to do with white people. Or at least that's how it's going to be recorded in the statistics and used politically. Okay. So the police publicly warned that this definition risked undermining the fight against terrorism and hampering free speech. That's their quote. I don't think I can say much more of that without the bobbies coming around. So we'll move on. So we'll go to the response to this, which was just to call the police stupid. As you can see from this article here, police have misunderstood the definition. No, they hadn't. They had taken the logic of hate crimes with the instruction of the government to its logical conclusions, and it ended up mad. The Times says the definition could, in effect, make it racist to criticize Islam or Muslimness, in quotes. You can think about what that means, and would clash with existing equality law, which defines racism more narrowly in terms of colour and ethnicity. Yes, the oppressive equality law that defines racism as on the basis of race.
Yes.
Insane. Backwards times.
I mean, they are completely accurate in what they're saying there.
Yeah, the police obviously pointing out that if you run hate crime logic to its conclusion, you end up with insanities like this. So, of course, the Labour Party and Liberal Democrats already adopted the definition, and the Tories were under pressure to follow suit, this article says. And the cons just refused to accept an argument that did not follow logic. I mean, clap for them. Bev friggin' minimum.
Conservatives found a portion of their backbone for once.
Yeah, if we move forward to the next article, you can see that, in which they just refused to adopt it. And if we move forward again, you can see a left-wing article in which leftists are still whining about this to this day. As you can see, Tories pause work on their own definition of Islamophobia 2 years after pledging to come up with one. Because you can't. It's a stupid word.
Yes.
You can't be phobic of a religion. Like, you're allowed to be rationally fearful of a religion, especially one that isn't accepting of homosexuals, for example. That would be a pretty rational thing for a homosexual man to be fearful of.
I'm pretty sure that was what people like Hitchens and the like were complaining about back in the day. Were they Christianophobic?
Yeah, so
criticizing Christianity?
This is why I think Majid Nawaz is correct. If you want to use this term, it should be anti-Muslim bigotry, not Islamophobic. It doesn't mean anything. If we move to the next one, we can also see the fact that hate crimes also do apply to punks, emos, and goths.
Yes, this is the Sophie Lancaster case, which, being from the metal community, is something that is very important within my little particular subculture, especially given that the guy who did it, one of the two guys, is being released from prison.
Yeah, but he attacked them for the way they looked, and therefore it was recorded as a hate crime. And you have to keep running this along its lines, because any subgroup, any subculture, can now be a group which can have a hate crime put against it. And that's why I'm so weirded out, and why I think the Americans should not follow any of this. Because you end up saying that furries are a protected characteristic, and therefore any crime against furries is a special crime. And so, well, why don't we just make the law? Because if every group, down to the individual, is a subculture, then why not just have the law on murder be the law on murder, and we don't have to mess with any of this?
That's the interesting thing about Sophie Lancaster's case. The guys who did it specifically said they targeted her and her boyfriend because they were a couple of moshers, because the guys who did it were a gang of like chavs. They saw goths, mosher types, and thought, let's just kick the ass out of them. But they still murdered one of them. It's still assault. Do you need to add an extra layer?
Sure, but that's not my point. My point is that if you accept the logic of hate crimes, that there are special groups because of feels that need to be protected. Okay, fine, you take that. You have it for race, because that makes sense, right? Because of the history of the United States. Okay, but then you have to expand that to sex. Okay, then you have to expand that all the way to goths, punks, and emos. And then you have to expand it to furries, your particular tastes. I mean, you are a subculture of one, we could argue. And at which point, well, then all of this is a complete waste of time, isn't it? It's just a way of politics inserting itself. And the intersectionals will insist it only goes one way, obviously, as well. So you may be saying, well, okay, maybe I'm not taking this murder 80 years ago very seriously. Well, Biden didn't. If we go to the next one, we can actually see him talking about this, in which he said that Emmett Till was born nearly 40 years ago. He was born in 1941.
Wait, does Biden think it's the 80s still?
So I don't really need to take this seriously if the man proposing the law himself can't even take the goddamn case seriously. If we move to the next one, we can also see the Vox article in which they explained more of this, saying the difference is in the historic and present-day effect of lynchings. The idea that the person who was killed is not only the victim.
Is not the only victim.
Sorry, not the only victim. And lynchings are typically motivated by the victim's race, religion, sexual orientation, or other identifier. Yes, Vox, that can go all the way down to goths, and further. Have you actually thought about that for a minute?
People can also kill each other, not based on any like group characteristic, but on individual characteristics, like I don't like you personally as well.
Well, that's a hate against his subculture of him.
Yes.
Literally, that's where this logic leads. Quote, lynching has typically sent a message to an entire community that you're not safe here or you could be next. Lynching has typically been motivated by racial animus and harms an entire community, said some professor at Howard University, presumably a dunce. Because, well, also, let's just play this in reverse for a minute, because if you're saying that, well, it harms the whole community, therefore we should make the crime worse. Well, interesting, we actually have statistics in the UK for this as well. If we move to the next one, we did the research on this, thanks to the Dr. Ella Hill who gave us this. And the hate crimes in the UK, the biggest victim of hate crimes, as in by group, is white people. Now what?
Big surprise there.
But your own ideology then falls down because you were attempting not to do such a thing and reveal such a reality. It was actually, 41% of all hate crimes were against white people, being the biggest group there? Which you might expect, being the biggest majority group, but then when you actually broke it down as well, you also found, Jews were the most likely to be victims of hate crimes as well. Wonder who that's by. Let's go to the next one, because of course we can also see the fact that this does not include the crime that cannot be named, those statistics.
Hypothetically, of course.
The victims of these criminals were not officially targeted for being white.
But if you see their DMs, their text messages, their words about it
in court, yeah, we'll move on from that because we can't mention that crime, can we? And we'll go to the next one, in which we can also argue, well, is purposely oppressing white children through the government also a crime, a special crime? I'll have a conversation about that someday as well. But then let's go back to the Vox articles. They have something more to say. They give us an example in which this law might be useful. But,
Okay,
still, man,
all right, let's hear it.
The 3 men convicted in 2021 of murdering Ahmed Arbery, Travis and Gregory McMichael, and William Rhodey Bryan could have been charged with lynching if the law was in effect. This doesn't make any sense.
They didn't lynch him though.
No, but you could argue they did. You could argue that. Fine. I don't know the details of the case. I didn't get to cover it as well. But let's just take all of it as true, right? Let's take a complete narrative and say it's all true, right? Who cares? Like, 2 of them got life imprisonment without parole. The other one got life imprisonment with parole in 30 years.
Wow, it really would have made all the difference.
It's just, yeah, like,
So
we already
if we
have
charged
justice
him,
here.
If we charged them purely with lynching, they could have actually had lower sentences.
Probably, but yeah, they would charge it with more, is the
obviously.
case. But the thing is, we already have justice. Like, the individuals carried out this crime, they got the terms that they got. Okay, then you could say everything's right, you've got justice. But you don't have racial justice. That's what this is about. This is why hate crime logic comes into play. And if we move to the next one, we can also see the fact that also the complaint about these people going to jail for so long. I mean, the majority of people in prisons in the United States are in for violent offenses as well. But let's go to the next link in which we can see Fair Cop talking about this, because what happens when this happens to a white person and the lynching law gets enacted? Did these black guys lynched a white guy? Well, we have this in the UK with the crime that shall not be named, or many another crime, in which, well, Dr. Hill is still actually arguing with the Welsh police to accept that whites can be victims of hate crimes to this day, and they refuse to because they're ideologically motivated. As soon as you introduce hate crimes into policing, the police force becomes an instrument of ideological will of the intersectionals. And this is an example here in which there was some mob attacking some TERFs. Which side do you think Manchester police are on?
I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Well, remember, it's offensive to be offensive.
Yeah. And this is why the Americans should not follow the law, or at least the road the British have led down, on this godforsaken path of racial justice or group justice. I mean, in this case, the group being trans, of course, in which we must stand with the trans community, make it a hate crime against trans people. Okay, well then, you have to take it further. And then which other groups are you going to take it to? Is being a TERF? Is that a protected group? If you attack someone because they're a TERF, is that a hate crime?
No, the clear thing that's come out of all of that is the fact that it seems that in protecting trans, we can no longer protect women. We just have to throw them out the side as a potential protected characteristic.
Sure, but the politicized nature of it. So, yeah, okay, we accept that trans activists are a protected category that have greater sentences against anyone who
Trans
attacks them.
activists don't even need to be trans.
But the TERFs, do you really think the Manchester police, I mean, come on, look at the logo,
Well, I know.
are going to give a toss?
Of course they're not.
No. This idea of racial justice or group justice endlessly leads down this political path. And this is why individual justice is antithetical to hate crimes and hate crime logic. Because you end up saying that the harm was done to X group by having the same skin tone, which doesn't make any sense. They're not victims of the crime. The victim is the victim of the crime. You would have thought. Anyway, moving on, I thought I'd also just point out that this is still paralyzing Britain as well to this day. Again, just another reason not to go down this path if you're not convinced. I mean, as you can see here, this is 2014. The fear of being seen as racist, an article on BBC News, far-right outlet, pointing out that the British police, again, did not act in regards to the crime that shall not be named because of fear of being called racist. All instigated by this logic being inserted into our police force. We go forward to 2017. Same situation. Still going on. Go to the next one, we have 2020. Still going on. Same thing. We ignored sex abuse of children. Why? Fear of being called racist. Next link, 2022. Still. Decade upon decade. Never going to end. Why? Because we accepted this logic into our policing system and it poisoned it to the core. No one should allow this to happen in the United States. If you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Series, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this one, Josh, taking a look at prepping and how to prep for a disaster. And if you want to follow Josh, you can also follow him on Getter at @Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.